So, hi everyone. I am so excited to have Chris Rossini with me today. He's a hero of the Liberty Report with Ron Paul. If you haven't watched them on YouTube, you absolutely should watch. They do a daily show and a weekly special, and they're really holding up the candle for liberty. One of the few outlets anywhere that really has got a complete focus on personal liberty. And I was just complimenting Chris on his antagonism towards the big state, which is something we all share. And the reason I asked him today, and he very kindly agreed, is to really talk us through a little bit of the, I guess, disappointment. We have to say it's some disappointment after a fantastic election where 77 million plus sort of patriotic Americans voted for making America great, and there were high hopes of JFK, of RFK, of Colonel McGregor. Other names were kicked around, and then it looks like we've got some names have come into the hat, which are not the names that certainly you guys wanted to see.
Yes, thank you, Alex, first for having me on. Yeah, I even myself, even though I know Trump is not a libertarian and I don't live in a libertarian country, we happen to have the biggest government in the world. I was optimistic about, you know, a lot of the things that he said about taking care of our nation because we are an empire, which I disagree with. I don't believe we should be. And I at least got the sense that we were going to move away from it. And I believe the American people are sick and tired of never-ending wars and what it has done to our country, both morally and economically. The military empire is the drain on our nation, and I'm sure much of the rest of the world would much rather that we leave them alone too. So, but as Trump has made his cabinet picks, they are very disappointing from that perspective. When you read about their beliefs, each one of them, it's not about America taking care of itself. It's still a very interventionist administration that we're heading into, and that is quite the disappointment.
So I've seen a lot of tweets. I'm going to get the guy's name wrong. The Fox News person, who I mean, he's gone really far, hasn't he? He's equating Americanism to Zionism, and I mean that's really going a long way. That's not saying you need to protect the state of Israel. He's even going further, right?
Yeah, it seems that way. I believe he's a Third Temple believer. I saw my colleague shared a video. I didn't watch it yet. But yeah, I mean, this is not Israel is its own nation. They should be in charge of themselves. We should let them be who they are and not support them, in my opinion, with money, definitely not with troops, but we are sending them money and arms. And I believe and I'm not just picking on Israel alone. I believe that it should be our policy not to favor or give money and weapons to any other nation. But obviously, Israel is, when you look at his cabinet picks, Israel applies to almost all of them. And their opinions, you know, with Mike Huckabee's, uh, I'm forgetting all their names, but I know that
Yeah, yeah,
they're very Israel centered. And that is
yeah,
not what we need right now. That can get us into a major war
yeah,
because people around the world, I'm sure in the Middle East, associate us with Israel. And it's not a good
yeah,
association. They don't look at us in a positive light. And that's very regrettable. We should
yeah,
have good relations with the Arab nations, even with Iran. Trade,
yeah.
communication, and our support of Israel prohibits that.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible? Because, of course, they're demonized, these regimes, in the run up to war. You know, there'll be now a lot of propaganda saying these guys do crazy things and we have to step in. Do you think that it's still possible to have a relationship? If you're leaving aside the affiliation with Israel, could you have a working relationship with Iran?
That's a tough question. You know, when it comes down to money and trade and and industry, people will tend to forget the past. But it's getting to that point. getting past all the rhetoric and the hatred, uh, that has built up since, I would say, the 1950s, when the U.S. overthrew, U.S. and the English overthrew Mossadegh, and that's why we had the reaction in 1979, because
Yeah,
the people in Iran were had enough of our leader, the Shah.
yeah.
So this is a very long story that we're dealing with. Is it possible someday in the future to let bygones be bygones? Of course, time always heals, but you got to get that started at some point,
Yeah,
and we're
yeah.
not there yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I've done quite a bit of study, as I guess we all have, of these think tanks in Washington. You know, the old favorites, the Atlantic Council, Hudson. It seems to be a very sort of bad mix of arms manufacturers and oligarch foundations. And, that is permanent Washington. And like,
Mm.
it seems to me we have the same problem everywhere that they're not listening to the MAGA guy, 77 million MAGA people who said, look, we don't want the forever wars, right? This class just seems to carry on regardless. And it's just moving from one conflict to the next, as you said, forever wars.
Yes, yeah, the military-industrial complex is a very real and very rich uh, institute. It's not one institution, but
Yeah.
spread out through all these companies and their think tanks, which are there to promote war, and then find the appropriate story to sell the war to the people. That's what they're there for, and to
Yeah.
legitimize it in some roundabout way, which they always find. And a lot of times it's just lies, just like
Yeah. Yeah. Years down
Saddam's.
the road, we find out it wasn't,
Yeah,
the Q80 incubators completely
exactly.
fabricated.
Yeah, all of those stories, but they just need the public to go along to get the war started. And then once it's started, you worry about the lies afterwards, so explaining them
Yeah.
away. And usually the public is on to something else and don't even care anymore. So they
Yeah.
have a good gig going. They are ultra rich. I live in America. If you go to the surrounding areas of DC, that's where the mansions are, that's where the military contractors are. They live very well off of the rest of the country with their wars, and they definitely do not want them to stop because they want to maintain their lifestyles, of course. So it's a very uphill battle.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned with the voting, Americans don't want this, and usually Americans vote for the peace candidate. The American people are not
Yeah.
generally like the military industrial complex. We will vote for the person that promises to end the war, but they
Yeah.
always break the promises because they know they can.
Yeah. Yeah. And but this, at some point, will it not be different, right? With the debt situation where it is, at some point you kind of run, or not run out of money if you're printing your own currency. But you know what I'm saying, that the
Yeah.
debt GDP ratio is as bad as it's been for since the war, Second World War. They don't
Yeah.
seem to care about that either, right?
No, I think they start to believe their own lies. They may think that this is perpetual, that they can do this forever. I don't know why. All they have to do is look at history. Uh, Empires bankrupt themselves repeatedly,
Yeah.
and to where they
Overextended.
overextend. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I guess they may believe. If I had to guess, I'm not, one of them. But they may believe that it'll happen someday in the future and let the next guy worry about it.
Yeah.
It's not happening
Yeah.
right this second.
Yeah.
So they probably have that mentality too.
Yeah. And I mean, the Libertarian Party didn't run a candidate, right? They had one in 2016, I guess, or did they run someone? Or what's the best way to influence? Is there any way to influence that sort of
Um,
beltway bureaucracy?
I think they ran someone named Chase Oliver. I think I remember seeing. I am not affiliated with the Libertarian Party. A lot
Oh,
of a lot of times they do their version of libertarianism is a little different than my own. Uh,
mhm.
so, but yeah, I don't know if they're having much of an influence. I can't say either way because I don't really pay attention to them. My
Yeah.
philosophy is the same as my boss's, Ron Paul, and that's to educate people, do things like what we're doing right now, and share
Mm.
what we believe is the truth to the best of our ability, and it does spread, especially when
Yeah.
people are eager for it. And the
Yeah.
American people, I believe, were eager for something different than what is being
Yeah.
presented by President Trump so far.
Yeah. And how much do you think the funding of the political system is a problem? So roughly both sides are getting 1 billion each for the presidential campaign. If you look at the background of the funders, kind of similar billionaires in finance and big tech. It feels like that's kind of a clique, and below them are the sort of Democrat versus Republican politics every 4 years. Is there a problem with like a permanent group of funders who really call the shots?
Yeah, I'm not so much worried about the average person and even the multimillionaires sending tens of thousands. I'm more concerned with the real big money in this
Yeah,
world.
the top
And
10.
our empire is American in name, but it is global in scope. There are
Yeah,
people from all over the world that have an interest in how the American government is used. And so we're like a shell. I'm an American citizen, but I am under no illusion that my government is a bunch of red-blooded Americans that care, about taking care of me. It's just not the case because we are an empire. If I lived in a country that was its own nation, that took care of itself, that defended itself, and that's all it was interested in, then that would be the case. I would have, but that is not the case in my life. There are big money interests all over the world. And with Trump's picks, you can see that that influence was much stronger than the amount of votes and what Americans wanted. America
yeah.
first. Yeah, the big money is, and it's not something that I believe can ever be gotten rid of,
No,
because people will always find ways to influence and find loopholes and everything else. So
yeah,
it's the empire that's the problem, and
yeah.
we're still there.
And how much you said there's a lot of I've seen a lot of interest in your channel now. So this have you seen a lot more traction, and what do people do once they're educated? So, we've been educated by Ron Paul. I mean, what's the next initiative if we don't like, do you write to someone and say, "Hey, we voted you in on America first, and looks like we're going to go to war with Iran, that we don't want to do that."
No, I know. Our hands are kind of tied. All you is your big power, the fact that you can go and pull a lever and vote for somebody, and that's it.
Yeah,
Because the politicians, when we vote for them, they don't know who we are. They get a number. It's an
yeah, yeah.
anonymous number. But they do
It's a big
know
number though this time
it's a
round.
big number, yes. So they know
Yeah,
the general sentiment, but they also know the individual person that hands them a big check. I'm thinking
yeah.
of Miriam Adelson handing $100 million to
100.
Trump.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
knows her
yeah,
personally, and
yeah,
that is not she doesn't do that
yeah,
without expecting something in return. And based
yeah,
on the cabinet's picks, one can't come to another conclusion that Israel, as far as their interests are going to be, will be served, based on this. So
yeah,
it's very, again, it's how much influence do you have? Uh, it's it's not much, but you do need
yeah,
a population that understands the critical problems and a way to the solution. And
yeah,
because ultimately, even despite all the money, they will be beholden to public opinion. And
yeah,
with
yeah,
social media and with X specifically, the ability to tell the truth and for it to get there, the odds are good. We didn't have that before. So
yeah,
we have a fighting chance.
yeah.
But it's an uphill battle. Yeah.
Uh,
I forget my
so,
train of thought.
Chris, what do you think about this Department of Government efficiency? I'm not 100% sure. To me, it feels like a small consolation to the Make America Great crowd that really wanted something good and they didn't get it, and they've been given this kind of meaningless constellation, which would have been fantastic with Ron Paul in there. Of course, that would have been a dream come true, but that's not going to happen either.
Yeah, I mean, Ron Paul agreed to advise and not have a official position. So that's, I guess, still possible, and I hope it happens.
Yeah,
What I'm reading, it's not going to be an actual department. They won't have a budget. They don't have any authority. So Is it a gimmick? I hope not, because it can be used for positive purposes. If because Americans should know, even if it exposes what government does, I think that will be a net plus.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want cuts, but I don't know if it doesn't look like Elon is going to have any powers to cut. But if they could expose what our government does in our name and the general public at large, because Elon is such a favorable figure, it could
Yeah.
end up doing good in that sense. Ideally, you want actual cuts to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that that's possible, but I don't know all the details.
Yeah. And one thing I was going to ask you, I've done quite a lot of the work on the election outcome for 2024, and it's a big question for me how, millions of votes less than 2020, and I've got some real questions. I saw that the turnout percentage in 2020 was the highest since 1904. And so the idea that I think it's 66 something percent for Joe Biden for that election, total turnout. And you look back at elections for Ronald Reagan, Kennedy, Nixon, they were like mid 50s. And it really, to me, it seems crazy that the turnout goes up. And there was 21 million more votes in 2020 versus 2016. And then now it's gone down. It doesn't make sense.
No, it's very suspicious. I think everybody knows deep down. Kind of like, but we're so riddled with so many scandals. You have COVID, you have these wars, you have that, and you can only focus on what they're going to decide to focus on.
Yeah.
I don't believe our elections are anything to brag about, even in the least bit. I live in a state where you don't need an ID to
Yeah.
to vote. And mine's
Yeah.
not the only state. In fact, Kamala Harris, I believe, won a vast majority of the states where you don't need an ID to prove who you
Yeah,
are.
it's sort of a one-to-one match, wasn't it? That map that's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
these are the
So,
Democrat states, and they, by coincidence, have no ID requirements.
right, right. So, and I'll be truthful, I don't believe that politicians want a good electoral system. I think they like having the ability to maneuver if they have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
fudge things. So
yeah,
they
yeah.
don't want something exact. Well, what if it's close and you had a chance to
And there's
steal
no
it?
override. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
no button to flick if it's honest.
exactly. So, I can't prove something like that, but I know how politicians are. And they probably like the wiggle room that you can
Yeah,
fudge things if you had to.
yeah,
Now, this was such an overwhelming victory that they can't, which is
yeah,
what needed to happen. But if it was
yeah,
close, I'm
yeah,
sure they want that leeway
yeah,
to move things in their favor.
yeah, yeah. Good, good. So, what else? Are you going to just keep looking to see which new posts are filled and keep updating people about your view on the new administration?
Yeah, that's what we do. We do it on the Ron Paul Liberty Report, and we do it individually on X. So yeah, I'm not a doom and gloomer, even though Trump could always surprise. I'm sure he's going to do some things that are very good that I'm going to
Yeah,
support and be happy with. Which with Kamala Harris, that was a non-existent
yeah,
possibility.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
will be optimistic when it's time to be optimistic with the Trump administration. But as an American citizen, it's my duty to be critical when he does things that are not in our interest, and especially war. We have no
yeah,
reason to be in wars around the world whatsoever. We have
yeah,
our own nation here. We have two oceans. We have this big military might. We can defend ourselves.
yeah.
But that's, you know, and if we could, myself personally, help spread that mentality to where other Americans believe that you don't have to tell China what to do or Russia what to do, let everyone be themselves, then that would be a good contribution that I could make.
That would be a better than good contribution. That would be an 800 billion saving contribution, as well as the lives. The lives, of course,
Yes,
are
yeah.
horrendous. And I just winding up, I remember I saw you must have seen it too, the CNN polling where they went around the room and said, hands up anyone who thinks we should be sending, I think it was sending more money to Ukraine. And they did a pan camera around the room. Not one hand went up. So again, it's only Washington Beltway that's hot for this stuff. The
Yeah,
people never anywhere want wars. Never.
no, no. And those who start wars know that, and uh, but they also know what buttons to push on people's emotions
Yeah,
and what pictures to show them, what words
yeah,
to use to
yeah.
change that mentality. And that's the battle we will have always faced and will always face.
Yeah, I think it was Harold Laswell or something, the master of war propaganda. He said it's you have to there should be no doubt left in the public's mind about who to hate. So
Exactly.
they've had a lot of history of doing this, of manipulating emotions to get people to do silly things.
The one
So
positive that I say is the mainstream media in America is falling to
toast.
pieces.
Yeah, yeah,
So that is a very good thing because their propaganda apparatus is not what it was before. That's not to say they can't
yeah,
pull it off again,
yeah,
but
yeah,
they now have one hand tied behind their back, and I believe that's a good thing.
yeah. Excellent. Well, that's been great. So thank you very much for that. I think a lot of people will find that interesting.
Oh, thank
So thank you.
you.